So I've been a little silent on social media and the podcast, but we have some great guests that we have planned for 2026. And I wanted to get on here and do a little recap on everything that's been going on in 2025 across broader hospitality, in my own business, and what I'm thinking about for 2026. Because there's going to be a lot going on. There was a lot of excitement in 2025. There was a lot of highs, a lot of lows, and I definitely made some mistakes. So what I want to do today is really share some of the ways that I could have improved outcomes, that I could have thought about things differently, and hopefully save everyone here some time and pain. But the reality is, the only way I've ever learned anything in life is from people that are smarter than me, people that I view as my mentor, and from the mistakes that I've made. So hopefully by sharing some of the mistakes here, you can help yourself. We're closing out the year. I want to do it on a high note, and let's go. So I want to start with some highs. So 2025 for me was definitely acquiring the White Barn Inn. This is this amazing little hotel we bought in Kennebunkport, Maine. It was for like $800,000 a key, a lot of money. And we're going to put money into it. We have some renovation projects that we're doing right now. The hotel crushed it this summer. So it's really gratifying actually to buy a hotel and then to be able to make distributions within the first quarter. So somehow we did that and we decided to hold a little bit back. And that's maybe a lesson learned from previous deals. When things are going well in the beginning, you don't want to just distribute everything. You got to save a little bit because there's going to be potentially bumps ahead. There's going to be things that change in your business plan. You know, one of the things that I always like to say when we're acquiring a hotel is it's important to have a plan, have some goals and objectives, but you can't be so rigid about that plan that you have to do it. You have to execute on it. And that's the only thing that you'll consider. You have to be open-minded because when you get into a hotel, when you get into a business, you really start to understand it more. And maybe the idea that you had is not the best thing to do at first. And maybe there's a version of that idea that is actually better that you should pivot to and that you should do. So at White Barn Inn, for example, you know, one of the things we didn't expect that we're doing right off the bat is they have these small rooms and they go for over $1,000 a night. And in the summer season, you know, sometimes there'd be guest complaints because the rooms are small, but they're charging like $1,200 a night. And in our budget meeting for 2026, the sales team, who's amazing, said, you know, we would kind of have to cap these rooms because we don't want our scores to get crushed. And we don't want people to have this complete mismatch in terms of price and value. So we said, well, wait a second, we don't want you to cap the pricing. Why don't we just enhance those rooms a little bit? So that's what we're doing now. We are enhancing those little small 5 rooms. And we never had that in our business plan going in. We had money set aside to do other things, but not specifically that. So by learning, by seeing what's going on, we're able to pivot. The other thing which we had in the plan all along was to do more houseboats. So there's one houseboat that just knocked it out of the park this summer. And if you guys haven't checked it out, go to White Barn Inn, check out the Cora houseboat. It is phenomenal. It's not even really a houseboat. It's a floating cottage. And I think there's probably a bigger business idea in here actually to even just buy a marina or rent some slips at a marina and put a couple of these boats. I mean, we get the benefit of operating at this great hotel and can do things on a very cost-efficient basis. So it doesn't really cost any additional expense for us to add some of these keys that we're doing. But the boat is a really efficient way to add the key because it can be dropped in the water probably from construction start to finish in about 6 months. So we're going to have 3 additional ones in the water this summer. They go for like $4,000 a night in the peak of summer, and they are phenomenal. And it's completely unique. I mean, you're sleeping in a bed, you roll over, you look out your window, there's like a guy like kayaking down the river. It's truly magical. So we're doing that. We're doing a little restaurant renovation in one of their smaller restaurants in the hotel. And then we're kind of adding this front patio to drive more food and beverage sales. Everything we're doing for the most part at the beginning is really ROI facing and it's intended to generate more revenue. So we looked at everything at that hotel with how can we add value and not just add costs. There's certainly some cost stuff we're adding that, you can't pinpoint directly to revenue, but the stuff we're tackling and prioritizing first has a very high ROI. The stuff with maybe mid ROI, it's lesser priority, but we know the things that are going to have the pop, we want to execute on first. So the team is running to do that. Another thing that was a success is we pushed for the exits of 2 assets. One kind of came at the end of 2024. I'll mention it though. Another one came in 2025, and we made a bunch of preferred equity investments, kind of like rescue capital in 2020, 2021 during COVID, when a bunch of friends in the industry were struggling just like we were. We were able to raise some capital and then go invest in these preferred positions in these hotels. And in one hotel in particular, it was in New York City. It turned out to be a phenomenal deal, but we basically forced the seller to refinance us out at the peak. He could either sell the hotel and pay us off or refinance. And we pushed him to refinance. We helped. We did all this stuff. But, a lot of people in the industry would say, hey, New York is on fire right now. It's always going to go up. It's just going to keep going up. Why don't you guys just stay in that position, refinance, and stay in the deal? Well, New York might not always go up. New York hasn't always gone up. There's union problems. There's potential supply issues. There's government issues. There's all this stuff that can impact a hospitality investment. And the reality is hospitality investments tend to be cyclical and they're very difficult to time. And you don't necessarily know what's coming down the pipe. So if you see an opportunity to sell or exit, maybe you're leaving a little bit of money on the table, you should take it. Like, wins are great. Like, putting liquidity in your pocket is an amazing thing. And business is hard. The hotel business is the hardest form of real estate. So I'm very grateful that we pushed for that exit and we were able to return money to our investors. And it ended up being like an 18% internal rate of return. So it was amazing. Now let's get to some of the mistakes, because I always make mistakes. And one of the mistakes that we made is related to timing, and that's allowing debt to basically dictate what our options are. So typically loans have a finite maturity. All loans have a date when you have to pay it back. And this goes to my kind of conversation when you don't know where the market's going to be when your loan matures. So if you have the opportunity to refinance in a very, very strong market, you should probably do it. Now you have to be conscious of the prepayment penalties and the ability to get out if you want to stay in. But what happened in this deal, it's another preferred deal. And basically we had a hotel investment where we were the preferred position. Our partner was in the kind of sponsor common equity position. We had some major decision rights. And we were coming up about, call it 12 to 14 months on a debt maturity. And the hotel was performing unbelievably, like had huge NOI. So I'm going to make up some numbers, but the NOI was basically, call it $10 million at the end of 2024. Right now, banks for assets like that are, call it, lending at a 10 debt yield. So you at least want to have a 10 debt yield to get financing if you don't really have that much of a story. If you have a story, you can get a slightly lower debt yield. And debt yield is just the income divided by the principal balance on the loan. So at a 10 debt yield, you could have gotten a lot of debt. And on $10 million, you could have got a $100 million loan. And the market in 2025 just went completely backwards. And our partner was kind of like, hey, we're going to sell, we'll refinance in 2025, or we'll pay you out. But we just assumed, even though the pace was a little soft for 2025, that the market would kind of not be that bad, that maybe we'll just repeat what we did in 2024. Well, we didn't repeat what we did in 2024, and the market got absolutely toasted. And everything went against us. And it wasn't really an operator issue. It was more market driven. But imagine our NOI is 10 million at the end of 2024. And then it drops to, I'm making these numbers up, but let's say basically the equivalent of 7 million. So we lost $3 million of net operating income. Now that's material because in this example, let's just say we had an $80 million loan. So at the end of 2024, I could have gotten a $100 million loan, 10 dead yield. Now I still have this $80 million loan that's maturing at the end of 25. And maybe if my income's only 7 million, I can get like a 10 debt yield. That's $70 million of debt. So now I can't even get a loan to pay off my senior lender at 80 million. So, that means you're toast. And you have a couple options there. You can try and negotiate with the lender and ask for some more time. They're going to want you to pay down the loan potentially. And every lender's different. So there's some lenders that exist in the world that are just very relationship oriented. These are kind of your local banks. And the other end of the spectrum is like predatory lenders, basically lenders that are in a lender disguise, but they're really equity investors. And they are hoping, they'll never tell you this, okay? They'll never tell you this, but they're really hoping that you will F up and they'll be able to take back the property. And in this instance, it looks like that's potentially going to happen because we tried, we negotiated, we kind of worked a back channel angle. We tried a couple different things, but the lender feels like 26 and 27, like we feel is going to be great years, that 2025 is just a blip. And they feel like if they foreclose now, they'll actually be in an amazing position, own the whole thing and ride the wave up. Now, part of that's lender selection and part of that is failure to plan on our part, where we just assumed that we could get financing enough to take them out this year. We easily could have done it in 24 and we didn't. So the hotel market is, I would say, more sensitive. Certain aspects of the hotel market are more sensitive to different cycles going on in the world, different macro events. It's impossible to time the stock market. It's impossible to time the hotel market. So we were basically jamming ourselves in a corner because we had two options. We could sell, we could refinance, or we could maybe extend with a lender. So I guess you had a third option. But by having this debt maturity, you're just up against a wall. There's nothing you could do about it. Had we had taken out the debt a year earlier when, the property is performing better, it would have been a much better situation. We would have had potentially an extra 3 years to time the market and figure out when we thought it was a good time to sell and when we could push for an exit. Because in the preferred position, we could push. We just couldn't totally push at that moment. So another mistake that I think we made so I have like over 900 employees across all of our hotels, and each hotel runs like its own business. So they have their own executive leadership team. And what we do at our company is we follow a system called EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System, and we use a tool called 90, which I would recommend if you're running a business to use this tool. It's, a cloud-based system. My whole team can manage it. Everyone on our corporate executive team is on it. And basically it's to track goals, to track KPIs, to track to-dos. And it's a great way to kind of manage a meeting and run a meeting. So every Monday morning, I have a 3-hour meeting. We go through this 90 dashboard and then people fill it in as they go. But goal setting is one of the most important things. If you go to any of these gurus, I've been to a bunch of them. I just went to Tony Robbins' event. It all revolves around goal setting. It's like not mind-breaking stuff, but it's all versions of goal setting. And if you're a salesperson and you don't have clear goals that are actionable and measurable being the key term there, then you're just going to bumble around. And I have no way to determine whether you're doing a good job or a bad job. It's like all subjective as opposed to being objective. So at one or two of our properties, I don't think our sales teams had either the right goals or measurable enough goals for us to track whether their performance was going to cause a problem for us or not. And in 2 hotels, we basically were not tracking their performance as closely as we should have been and reacting as quickly as we should have been had we seen on a monthly and quarterly basis, here's their goal, here's what they booked, like what's the issue? There could be an issue that's legitimate, but knowing what that issue is and then being able to react is a skill that would separate someone from their competitors. And in a couple instances, we didn't do that as tight as we should have. So that is an area of mistake, I think. And it doesn't have to be a salesperson. It could be, anyone. We just hired a consultant and I said, well, how do I know if you're doing a good job? Like, what is your measurement to determine success in this outcome? And we have we're going to set very clear goals with that consultant to know whether they're doing a good job. It's like a sales revenue kind of function. So it should be very measurable. Did our scores improve? Did our revenue improve from here to here? Here is their business plan. Here's what they wanted to do. Is that related to their metrics and their goals? The other thing that's related is, I think, not removing people from the bus fast enough. And, as you start your company, there are people in a business that maybe are fine. And then as you grow, they become not fine. And you can read, Collins books and they all talk about, right people on the right bus, but also is the person in the right seat on the bus? And is your company made of a bunch of C players? That would be terrible. Is it made up of a bunch of B players that can become A players? Or is it made up of mostly A players with some Bs that are going to be pushed to an A? And I think we had a few instances at the properties where we had, weak performers and we didn't react quick enough to make a change. And reacting quick enough is sometimes scary because now you have to find someone new. You have to move resources from over here to help plug a hole there. But we have a pretty big company. We could do that. We just need to, decide and have the intention to do it. And we, in some cases, maybe, didn't do it quickly enough. On the counter to that, in other cases, where we put people on a performance plan, they absolutely crushed it. And the reason they crushed it is because we had measurable goals and objectives on that performance plan, and we could track what they were doing. And then they weren't just bumbling around kind of in this no man's land. So those were a couple of the big mistakes I think I made for 2025. I definitely made more, but like big ones that I wanted to share, and some more might be revealed in the Q&A, but those were some big mistakes that we made. When I looked at 2026, there's a couple things that I think form, my perspectives and my viewpoints. And there's a great shout out that I'm going to give to Jan Freitag over at CoStar, who's like a hotel economist, consultant, whatever you want to call it. And he puts out a monthly email to some friends, and he always has some great data points and some summaries of articles that he writes throughout the month. So what's happened in 2025 across the US broadly at all hotels is RevPAR has been consistently declining. So if you don't know what RevPAR means, it means revenue per available room. So revenue is declining. The second question you should ask yourself is what's happening to expenses? Well, expenses potentially are increasing. So while hotels are typically a great inflation hedge, in January, up 4.3%, that's beating inflation most likely. But what do you do, when you have these down months, like 2.4%? That might be, certainly not beating inflation. Now you have revenues declining faster than expenses are increasing. And I think this is driven by a complete shift in the hospitality industry that I've been seeing over the past couple of years. And I think that's the move away from commodity branded, mediocre tertiary hotels and urban hotels to more experienced luxury driven hotels. And hotels have gotten incredibly transactional. So you have, I would say, two categories. You have kind of the wealthier people basically deciding they want to either go to a city or go to a specific hotel, and then they book that hotel. If they want to go to a city, they're going to find the best hotel in that city and book that hotel. So even if they're kind of saying, oh, I want to go to, New York, you're going to kind of narrow into the best hotel in New York. And on the lower end, they're just saying, I want to stay at a hotel in Fort Lauderdale, and I don't care where it is. I don't care what brand it is. I just want the cheapest room, or I want it proximal to this thing that I'm doing. And I really don't care. And all these hotels are just like blending together. Like Marriott has 30 brands. I'm like an owner of like 12 Marriotts. I don't even know the difference of all these brands. I mean, I do, but like, it's really hard to figure out the difference. And things are just looking so bland and boring today that the opportunity is unique, one of a kind assets and experiential assets, I think, particularly in the luxury segment. So if you look at, I'm going to just pull up another interesting chart here. And, this is lodging spend for households making, call it over $150,000 or more. So if you're making a lot of money, you are just doing the bulk of the spending right now. Like you have the upper echelons just spending. And what that's resulted in is the luxury segment, and I would put experiential hotels in that, is just far, far, far outperforming every single other segment. I mean, look at this chart. It's crazy. This is full year 2025. So you have every single other segment in hospitality is basically down or kind of flat. And then you have luxury that's up. And luxury has been up for the past couple of years. And what we're seeing even at, our luxury properties, we're buying, we bought White Barn, we're actually buying another one, is that their budget is up year over year. And I don't think it's just because everything always goes up. It's because their pace is up. They're seeing the forward booking momentum, and people are choosing to be at these unique hotels because of what it says about them, what it says about their company, what it says about their brand. And it doesn't only have to be luxury, but I think it has to be something unique, something special. The other thing that I think is happening that's interesting in hospitality is hospitality has expanded beyond hospitality. So there's this it's not that old of a saying, but it's been around for a few years, and it's like, you got married in a hotel ballroom, your kids are going to get married in like a barn somewhere. And that whole shift has completely happened. So like when corporate meetings used to take place only in hotel ballrooms and meeting rooms, now they're taking place in a variety of different venues. And what that means for hotels is you have to be an experience. You have to be something unique and special, or, very well located, have great food and beverage facilities. The other thing that I think is also going to start happening is I think there's a lot of inexperience happening in some of these alternate hospitality venues, which will drive people back to hotels where there's maybe more highly sophisticated management. You can get better service. It's more reliable. So people kind of, it's like Airbnb, like some of these Airbnbs are a big disappointment, and it maybe turns people back to hotels if it's not a full hospitality experience, if it's just a basic transactional thing. So that is a big trend that I'm seeing. The other trend is I think there's just hotels that were built in markets that are just obsolete. Like the use and the demand just doesn't exist anymore for this hotel. Like who needs like a 900 room hotel built in the 80s, like adjacent to like Chicago airport? Like there's so many hotels in Chicago. There's so many hotels around. Like, I don't know, like why, if you were IBM, like why would you want to go there to have your meeting? So it's going to be tough for certain assets. And like what you're seeing in office, there's going to be a lot of repricing of things. So not only did you have like the double whammy of challenges during COVID in hospitality, but you have like the doubling and tripling of interest rates. And now in 2025, we're seeing the reckoning of that, where owners have to refinance their properties and they might not be able to get enough debt to replace their loan. And that's where, potentially things happen. That's where you maybe have less money to put into maintaining the asset, less money to put into making it special. So it's certainly going to be interesting, but it doesn't mean I'm right. There's going to be opportunities in buying hotels at a very good price in markets today that are very well located, because construction costs have also skyrocketed and construction costs are out of control. So when you think about replacement costs, you could buy hotels today, most cases at well below replacement costs, some cases not, but in most cases, well below replacement costs. And I think that's going to bode well for supply coming down the pipe, because with low interest rates, with construction costs where they were, that's just like a massive, massive, massive amount of new hotels coming online. Like, we have a couple hotels in Fort Lauderdale. That market was way oversupplied from 2019 to now. I think like in the broader Fort Lauderdale market, like, I'm talking way out, there's like 50 new hotels and they might be like 30 room hotels or a 200-room hotel, but that's a lot of properties. And there just wasn't that rapid acceleration of demand over that period. So kind of here's a chart across the US that shows where construction is, which I think is very positive for the industry because supply is just down and you don't always see this. And the other thing I think is people could be planning these hotels, but financing has also gotten more challenging. The standards have gotten higher. The guarantees have gotten higher. So I think that's good if you own a hotel today because there's going to be less supply. Now, the flip side of that is the brands, Hilton, Marriott, are not in the hotel business anymore. If you look at their stock prices are completely disconnected from hospitality REITs or any real estate REIT. They're in the marketing business and they don't care really about the same things that owners care about. They care about their stock price. They care about driving revenues to the things that they sell. And they have built a wonderful business for themselves, but their goal is to increase their portfolio, increase the amount of hotels that they have out there. So while construction costs remain high, hotel companies are going to try and incentivize people to build. That's their goal. So it's just something that you have to be mindful of and watch out for. Another thing, to think about is just whatever worked in the past is not guaranteed to work in the future. And you have to be constantly innovating because the customer, the guest is just always changing. And I think the best way to find ideas and be inspired is to be on social media. I'm obsessed with social media. And all my friends have these things where they're like, I'm deleting my Instagram for a week. And they always come back because it's too fun to see all the good shit and to get all these great ideas. So, it just doesn't last. And you can't be like crazy obsessed with social media, but it's fun to be inspired by what you see there. And there's a lot of very interesting things that you can learn and tweak and enhance with your property based on things that you're seeing out in the world, things that you're experiencing yourself at other properties. But I think largely the brands and these bigger hotels have just gotten very stagnant. And they need to find better ways to differentiate themselves from their local competitors and figure out how to be better, how to offer great service. We had someone staying in our hotel this week and he just said the bellman was so amazing. He directed him through the hotel and told him all about the hotel and the coffee shop is so great and what his favorite pastry is. Well, that's what makes you want to be in the hotel industry. Or when you have a waiter at a restaurant who just recites all the specials. It's mostly an Italian restaurant, right? Where these specials are more than the menu. And, they know it by heart and everything you want to eat because it sounds so good based on how they're saying it. It's they're singing it to you. That's what's inspiring. And unfortunately, we got to a period, I think it was spurred on by COVID and that whole terrible time, whereas the fun of hospitality was taken away and you have to bring back the fun of hospitality because if you're not in this business to have fun, then you should not be in the business because you're not going to make the most amount of money in hotels. There's probably other ways to make money, but you're doing it because you love it. You have a passion for it. You like real estate. You want to do more than just a boring real estate building. That's why you're here. But that passion, I think, has gotten sucked away as large institutional owners have owned a lot of these hotels and they become very financialized. I think they have to bring back the entrepreneur, bring back the passion. And that's why you see a lot of smaller, unique, independent hotels really working versus some of the bigger hotels. And if you look at a city, some of the ones that are just written about and photographed in magazines are these unique independent ones that are design led. Maybe have a great food program. Maybe have these cool little experiences. Maybe you're in a emerging location, all that stuff. So that is what I think 2026 will bring. I'll close with some exciting news. We're under contract to buy another luxury asset, an experiential property, which we're very excited about. There's a lot of opportunities at the property to even enhance it more. And obviously I'm bullish on the segment, but I think for me, it just inspires me because it allows me to be creative and to do the things that I love. And it feels like why you got into hospitality in the first place. And for the past 4 or 5 years, it's felt like more of an obligation, more of a chore, and not all the time, but sometimes. And to be able to have these inspiring properties and to enhance them more that already have this, this great foundation as a privilege. So I'm excited about that for 2026. I'll share more when I can, but cannot share more now. Hey everyone, it's Jake here. Thanks again for joining me on this conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at @Wurzak. I'll see you in the next episode.
Jake Wurzak is the founder and CEO of Dove Hill Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Jake and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Dove Hill Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect or represent real estate, financial, or investment advice.